Radio for the masses.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
If the game is rigged, change the game. Game changer.
I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
This is Fade to Black with your host, Jimmy Church, on the Game Changer Radio Network.
All right. Good evening, Fade to Black. How you doing? Today is Wednesday, January 3rd, 2024. Kicking off the new year right. Let's do this, man. I am ready for tonight's show. Help support everything that we do around here all the way through 2024. It's easy enough to do. Two ways to do it. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt. Everything is signed, include shipping. We've got 2 shirts, 2 ways to get them. The links are below. Get yourself a Fade to Black t-shirt today. I am very excited about tonight's show. That's because Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove is with us. That's right, New Thinking Aloud. And I'm kind of mixed emotionally about tonight's show. What do? Do I read through Jeffrey's entire CV and bio that we all know? Do I do that out of respect and kill precious minutes of further conversation that we could be having? Do I just jump right into it as the fanboy that I am? Do I do that? Well, out of respect, let's just do it the right way. Jeffrey Mishlove, PhD, is the author of The Roots of Consciousness, Psi Development Systems, and The PK Man. He is the recipient of the only doctoral diploma in parapsychology ever awarded by an accredited university. That's right, the University of California, Berkeley, back in 1980. Between 1986 and 2002, he hosted and co-produced the original Thinking Aloud public television series. He was also a past president of the nonprofit Intuition Network, an organization dedicated to creating a world in which we all people are encouraged to cultivate and apply their inner intuitive abilities. His links are below, and I would like to welcome back to Fade to Black, the one and only. He's right here, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove. Jeffrey, good evening. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, and good evening. I'm delighted to be back with you.
You know, I don't know where to start, but I'm going to start here. All right. Last year, and it's okay to laugh. Okay. Last year, I'm taping my TV show, and one of my guests is Jacques Vallée. And Jacques and I had the opportunity, which we've done many times over the years, but we had the opportunity for a lot of private time together. And so we were sitting late into the evening. We had been talking for about 6 hours. We're in the middle of this long, beautiful conversation. And so I turned, I said, so Jacques, I said, Jacques, Jeffrey Mishlove, that show. And he goes, Jimmy, I can imitate Jacques. I'm not going to do it right now. He goes, Jimmy, I'm going to stop you right there. He said, don't take this the wrong way. I was like, okay, here we go. He said, we've done a lot of great shows, Jimmy. I said, yes. He said, but that show was the one. And that's high praise coming from not only an intellectual like him, but somebody that has faced every interviewer and every style of interview that we can imagine. And for him, and I said, hey, no offense taken, man, because I was going to say the same thing. That show was the one. And I just wanted to get that out of the way and say that to you personally, because that was a private moment with Jacques and I. But I think about that show so often, and I'm sure that people still come to you after all of these years going, man, that was the one. Ed, does that surprise you?
Well, it's interesting. I first interviewed Jacques Vallée in 1973, over 50 years ago.
He gave me the backstory about your relationship and things, which it's about trust, right? And so when two people interview and guest, right? Interviewer and host and guest and host. When you break down those boundaries of trust, you can go anywhere you want, and it shows that relationship is there.
We didn't always have a good relationship. Actually, there was a time when I was a graduate student in Berkeley, and I organized on the campus at Zellerbach Auditorium, which holds 1,800 people, a symposium on UFOs. And Jacques was one of the speakers, and he saw that when I had the announcements printed, the flyers all over campus, I included a photo of a UFO that he happened to know, I didn't know at the time, was fake. And when he saw that, he refused to show up. So I had a big audience, and I had to explain why one of the featured speakers wasn't there.
Oh, he was a no-show.
Well, it wasn't as if he failed to show up. He told me he won't come.
Yeah, right. I had, I'm not going to say who, but I used to have a logo for the show. This is many years ago, 10 years ago, that was a little controversial. I didn't do it. An artist did it, and I thought it was cool. But somebody that you and I both know and respect came to me and said, Jimmy, can't do the show. I said, why? Your logo. I said, wait. Let me change it. And, it was a very strange thing. A lesson learned, right? Where sometimes reputations matter. Yeah. And people just, and especially when you get into this community and you jump in with both feet, you're not aware of a lot of things, which brings me to my first question for you. After all of the interviews and the knowledge seeking, have you found the answers that you seek?
Oh, I'm always seeking, and I'm sure I always will seek. I found many, many answers, but I don't purport to be a person who has all the answers. I have more questions than answers.
But your journey, are you closer to the mark than when you started?
I would say I am. And the test of that, I suppose, is that I think of myself as one of the happiest people I know, and that's got to count for something. And I'm pretty sure when I started out, I was not. I was full of doubts and anxieties and mood swings, and that all seems to have lifted. So something's working.
Well, when you started the show, you were an adult. And but looking back, were you still a kid? Right, a lot of things have passed since then. Do you think about it in those terms?
I'm not sure I quite understand the question, but
yeah, I mean your personal growth, and you look back and you think about the innocence of where you were in 1973, 1983, versus where you are now. Yeah, do you look back and go, "Wow, I thought I had a grip," but I've come so far.
Well, I suppose the reason that I'm so happy, the number one reason, is I've had a great marriage. I've been married 45 years to a wonderful woman, and we've kept it together. That's the main reason. But after that, to be able to say that I devoted my entire adult life to exploring consciousness, the paranormal, and spirituality, it's been an enormous source of joy for me.
The idea of consciousness, and this is a great place to start. I I swing both ways. All right. I'm trying to find the answers to this too. And one of my favorite questions to ask a guest, no matter what their background is their take on consciousness. Is it in the physical or is it in the non-physical? And has your opinion on that changed? So I'm going to ask you the same question. Is consciousness of the physical or is it non-physical, and has your opinion changed?
My opinion has definitely changed. When I was a graduate student, I was still, I suppose, swallowed up by the materialistic, mechanistic worldview that permeates universities. And it's taken me a while to come to the point of view that the entire material universe exists within consciousness, that consciousness is fundamental. And I would even go so far as to say we're all interconnected. We are all intermingled and entangled because of consciousness. You might say we are all versions of each other.
And why is it? And that's such a great answer. It still hasn't changed. Still, I can swing both ways. I understand both arguments, both sides of the debate, I should say. But why is it that if you choose the path of physics, of the hard sciences, of mathematics, that you have to release any pondering of what consciousness may or may not be? Why is that line in the sand in academia? I just don't understand it.
It's implicit. It's not as if people are going to tell you, shut up and calculate. Although I have heard that it has been said from time to time.
Right.
But it's an ethos that exists in academia where consciousness is a taboo topic. If you begin to talk about it, particularly if you're in the hard sciences, people are going to start questioning your competence. I even know of an instance where my friend Brian Josephson, the Nobel laureate physicist, got uninvited to a physics conference. And when he asked why, he said, well, the organizer said nothing personal, but since you're interested in parapsychology, we can't have you.
It's fascinating to me because Maja told me to tell you hello, by the way. She was on the show last night and she was so excited. She's probably listening right now. We were talking about this subject last night, and it is so interesting for me that somebody who can think, can laugh, can taste, can be happy, can be sad, knows that consciousness is driving their thought processes as they form algorithms in physics, right? They understand all of those things, but they won't say the word. But if we go back, right, they just can't even let it come out of their mouth. But if we go back to Isaac Newton embraced everything. And in an intellectual way, wrote some of the most profound books and papers on different subjects because he pondered and he thought outside of the box. And somewhere we lost our way, didn't we?
Yeah, things changed after Isaac Newton. What happened is called by historians modernism. The scientific worldview that Newton pioneered got taken over by people who thought of themselves as Newtonians. And Newton wasn't exactly a Newtonian.
That's such a good point. And now, is it just because there is a fear of not being able to, because you can't quantify, you can't measure, you can't see it or touch it, so you can't write an algorithm and you can't get it down to some binary situation? that consciousness is something that time can't be wasted upon. Is it as simple as that?
No, it's much worse than that. Because
Is it?
the science of parapsychology for the last 140 years has produced thousands of experiments under rigorous conditions that show that we can measure and quantify the ability of consciousness to perceive information independent of the brain and nervous system, and to influence events in the environment independent of the human body or the muscles or anything of the sort. And so it's not that we can't do that. We can, and we have, but it gets ignored. If you talk to your average person in the field of physics or psychology, even at most major universities, they'll tell you there isn't a shred of evidence. It just doesn't exist.
I saw, as we get into this discussion tonight, I'm going to say this out loud, in the words of Jacques Vallée, don't take this the wrong way. I was watching an interview with Richard Dawkins, and I listened to all sides, right? Okay, all right, I do. I have an open mind. But anyway, he actually said these words. He goes, well, I don't know, the spiritual, and no, but I won't walk into a haunted house. That scares me. And I'm like, wait a minute, you can't have it both ways, right? He's almost dipping his toes in the water. Yeah. He's got, wait a minute, either it exists or it doesn't, Richard. And so do you feel that it's not spoken out loud, but there is a thinking mind out there when it comes to physics and the hard sciences that does ponder these things and does think about spirituality and consciousness existing out there in the ethos?
I think so. I think, after all, these people are human. They have consciousness, and undoubtedly they have occasional paranormal experiences of their own. Practically everybody does. So they're just afraid to discuss it with their colleagues. And I recall a story about Rupert Sheldrake was giving a talk once to a group of scientists. And after his talk, many of them came up privately to tell him about their paranormal experiences. And the funny thing is, they wouldn't dare talk to each other about them.
And maybe privately. Maybe privately, maybe I'm not going to name names. I just won't do that. But maybe some of these rock star physicists have UFO books. Maybe they watch New Thinking Aloud privately, right? They have a collection of VHS tapes. But yeah, I often wonder about that. Privately, maybe not in front of their fan base, and maybe not on television, but privately, do they sit around and discuss these things? That's a tough one. It's a tough one. They must. Wouldn't it be, isn't it just like anything else? Wouldn't it be freeing? Right? Couldn't you just, like coming out of the closet and finally telling your parents that maybe you're gay or something, where you release the pressure? Maybe it would do somebody some good to actually ask some fundamental questions.
And I think it's happening more and more. I think we're in an era in which consciousness is becoming an acceptable topic. And as soon as you start to talk about consciousness, it's very hard to ignore the paranormal.
Now, you said you've changed. Okay, so you went from that black and white, pragmatic, chemical-based world, right, where consciousness is a chemical creation of atoms within the body, or particles within the universe. And that statement, I kind of can understand and relate to, that maybe there's a little piece of consciousness in every particle, and you get enough of it together, and then poof, consciousness arises. But that would mean this guitar pick is conscious, right?
Well, I would say the guitar pick is embedded in consciousness. It's part of the conscious universe.
But to flip it to the other side, where particles are first, consciousness then enters into the equation. To make that shift, what happened for you? Was there something profound? Was there a personal experience for you to suddenly, take the exit lane off the freeway?
I can tell you a story about that. When I got my doctoral degree in June of 1980, when the faculty approved my dissertation. And so I went to see a fellow who was a mentor to me at the time, Arthur M. Young, who was the founder of the Institute for the Study of Consciousness at Berkeley. And he's the man who invented the Bell helicopter. And he was also an astrologer. So I told him, it's a big day today. I just completed my doctoral degree. And so he took out an astrology ephemeris and he's paging through it. And he asked me, well, how long have you been working on this PhD? And I said, 6 years. And he looked at me right in the eye and he said, well, it's going to take you another 6 years to undo all the damage that the university has done to you. And I can look back now, 50 some years later, or 40 some years later, and say, he was right. It did take about 6 years.
And what do you think the damage was? That's talk about a profound statement. What happened?
Well, when you're in the university system, you are caught up in the need to get approval from your colleagues, and particularly if you're a student, from your faculty. And if you're, of course, a professor, you're in the tenure business, and you've got to get approval from your whole department if you want to rise up the ranks as a professor. And so you walk a very careful line, and you're very careful not to say anything that's going to cause somebody to suspect you as being, amongst other things, a religious nut or something along those lines, particularly when you're already studying the paranormal.
When we parapsychology is a word that I think is used too freely without understanding. People say it all the time.
Yeah.
But probably don't actually understand what they are saying. Is it okay if I ask you what your definition is?
Yeah, I would go along, at least for starters, with the classic definition. The term was really popularized by J.B. Rhine in the 1930s, where he set up a parapsychology laboratory at Duke University. And he defined it as the scientific study of extrasensory perception and mind over matter, or psychokinesis.
Why did ESP, that term, kind of go away? Was it just a trendy thing?
It was very trendy. I didn't know that it has gone away. I still hear it being used, but I think terms like remote viewing have now replaced the old word clairvoyance. And people now like to talk about non-local perception rather than ESP. And I think it's some of these words, they just get stigmatized over time. And I'm pretty sure non-local perception and remote viewing are going to become stigmatized too, and they will get replaced.
Do you think, this is where I'm going to ask a UFO ET related question when it comes to consciousness. Obviously, we are in a pretty strange time here in 2023. Next week, another UFO briefing is going to happen. This time in private, in a secure situation with the IG, by the way, which is a pretty big deal, pointed at reverse engineering craft.
Mhm.
My question is, as it relates to consciousness, that if everything is universal, and I believe that it is, it's the same on the other side of the universe as it is here, and entanglement and all of these questions of faster than light and how is that possible? Well, physics is saying anything is possible today. That with our contact with ET, that consciousness and the connectivity of the universe is going to be a part of our reality. That's going to be a pretty tough one to cross. Is that a Rubicon that you never saw coming?
No, I would say I saw it coming long ago, but now it seems to be here, and we're actually dipping our toes in the water. We're getting ready to cross the river.
Wait, how do you feel?
I
mean, is it vindication? Is this, is this an opportunity to go, well, man, I've been talking about this for 50 years.
I have been, but I don't really want to rub it in anybody because people are having a very hard time digesting it. It's a big, big deal. The government undoubtedly has had a lot of knowledge going back many, many decades to the 1940s, maybe even earlier. And it seems to me that the revelations have been leaking out slowly for decades. Now it's building up steam, and I think we're due for some big revelations coming over let's say the next decade. But it's going to be very hard for the average person who's concerned about bread and butter issues to comprehend that we are now encountering what are obviously beings with advanced technical skill and advanced spiritual knowledge who are very, very different from us.
The question of I'm just going to use a very general term: telepathy, channeling, communication, the connectivity of the mind is something that may be suddenly thrust upon us. But doesn't that fill the gaps in all of the questions, not only with physics and locality and non-locality, all the way down through spiritual contact with a dead relative, or dreams or lucid dreams? All of this will suddenly be related to each other. Is this something the world can handle?
I think the world can handle it, and I think it'll take a few decades to absorb it, but a few decades is a relatively short time when you think of the flow of history. I think that it's a natural thing to do, and as you just pointed out, it's going to resolve a lot of paradoxes that we're now confronting. So I would imagine if you and I could have a conversation 50 years from now, we'll look back and say it was rough going for a while, but we got through it.
How do you think ET does communicate not only with people here on Earth, but they have to, if they get a flat tire, they've got to call, right? They've got to call AAA. And you're not going to wait at the speed of light. You need to reach back to Zeta Reticuli or wherever you came from and let them know what is going on. But that has to happen at the speed of now. Is that a consciousness type of communication that is occurring?
Probably. I mean, there's so many questions you're pointing toward that we just don't have answers for yet. Like, where do they come from, and how fast can they travel, and what is the relationship between their technology and their consciousness? Those are all still issues to be solved. But I think there's every reason to believe from the reports of people who have had contact with these beings that they do communicate telepathically. And there are even other reports that say they seem to have a familiarity with what we call the afterlife. It seems to be, part of their world as well. And so I would say that they have both a technical knowledge and a mystical knowledge surpassing us.
Well, wouldn't that indicate that, yes, everything is connected?
Yeah.
Whitley Strieber, this is many, many years ago. I was listening to, maybe it was his show, or this is, I don't know, maybe 20 years ago. But he said something that just stuck with me. And I've certainly asked him about it today quite a few times. But he said, well, maybe, just maybe, it's not the cover of communion, that the others, they may be us in the afterlife. And that's what is coming. And I just stopped and thought about that. We know nothing, right? It was such a profound thing to say. And, it's a thought experiment that maybe we've just got it all completely wrong. And that could be the connection that you're referring to.
And there are people who have written books saying they are us from the future. They're time travelers, not astronauts from distant star systems. We don't know. And besides that, I have reason to think it's not just one phenomenon. There could be many going on. When you look at all the reports of vehicles and beings and patterns of behavior, it certainly seems like we are confronting a whole zoo full of different types of manifestations.
And going back to, it's the same conversation, but going back to Jacques' way of approaching this for so many years, he kept suggesting to us, it's not what you think. Let's take another look at this. The phenomena may be, and it's not as nuts and bolts. Some may be nuts and bolts, right? And this, I'm paraphrasing Jacques, of course, but that it may be something entirely different that we don't understand at all. And here we are today talking about what Jacques and you have been discussing for the past 30, 40, 50 years. It's like humanity's got amnesia, but maybe these are the answers.
I suspect that what we're encountering has something to do with advanced consciousness, advanced beings. We have a lot of mythology about advanced beings in terms of angels and demons and devas and deities and so on. I think there's a lot of overlap between the legends that have come down to us, some in the Bible even, which many people take to be God's truth, that parallel the reports of UFO contactees. So it's an incredibly complex system that we're in. And Jacques seems to suggest that the manipulators of that system, perhaps even the creators of that system, are associated with what we call UFOs.
Well, okay, so it's a non-trivial question, right? It's the biggest question, but it also may be a very fundamental, basic answer, right? That is it just is. Right.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? It's really strange. It's kind of a paradox in of itself. It is the biggest question, but maybe the answer is really fundamental and very simple.
Well, imagine, Jimmy, that you are an extraterrestrial yourself in a civilization that could be millions of years old, as compared to our civilization, which goes back, I think, they say the human civilization, the oldest temples are maybe 15,000 years. You're in this advanced civilization, and for entertainment, they have a system where you forget who you are. Like when you're in a movie, sometimes you're watching a movie and you forget who you are. You're so involved in the movie. Only in this advanced civilization, the entertainment is that you become a person living in one of these primitive planets with a civilization a mere 15,000 years old, and you get to experience it from birth to death. And then after you die, then the movie ends and you discover who you really are.
Sounds like a video game being played in Zeta Reticuli. by a kid. And what you are, I like the process here, because that discussion is actually happening today with gamers, where they are able to play each other on opposite sides of the world, right? Online, in real time, in these created ultra realistic worlds. That's today. That same thing in 10 or 15 years with kids is going to be the multiverse, right? You are immersed in this. Well, let's push that ahead 15,000 years. And Jeffrey Mishlove is a character player, right? Right? And you've got some kid with a joystick, and you wouldn't know the difference.
And that's serious philosophers who are looking at the simulation hypothesis, that in effect we are living in the equivalent of somebody else's video game.
Now, okay. Now, this is where we go into the afterlife. Let's go there, and reincarnation. Yeah. Because if that is indeed the case, let's say we are in a simulation, and then we dream in the simulation, or we die in the simulation, and then we experience the afterlife in a simulation. Would that be would it bother you if you found out that you were in a simulation when all of that happened? Or would it be crazier to have it happen in real life? And does it matter? Right? What's the difference?
Well, now you're raising an interesting hypothesis. I just suggested that you leave the simulation when you die. But what if the death and the afterlife and repeated incarnations are also part of the simulation? I think if it were me, I'd find the whole thing hilarious. I would be rolling on the floor in laughter.
So, you know what? Would it change things? Right? Does it change your life if you find out that you're in a simulation, living everything like right now? Right now, you and I are in a simulation. Right? We are literally talking in real time, looking at avatars of ourselves. Right? We are.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't bother me. Right? And we're talking as if we're sitting in the same room.
Right.
It doesn't. And so would it change things? And I would say that it probably wouldn't. And why would it matter? Well, you're still happy. You're still sad. You still have to pay your bills.
It might suggest a whole new way of approaching reality, and it would certainly suggest, many new possibilities for exploration.
Why is it now? You live in the thick of it. You live in the theoretical, intellectual center of the known universe, right? That's where you are. And why is it that these brainiacs that are running these huge campuses of engineers and thought provokers and designers of society, these powerful. The smartest of the smart to suggest, 99% chance we're living in a simulation. It's just like, wait a minute, and you're running this company, right? That's a pretty scary thought. It seems like maybe somebody is pursuing something, or somebody knows something that we don't.
Well, it'd be hard to disprove that whether or not we're in a simulation. I think of it as a metaphor. I don't take it too literally, but I know people like Elon Musk take it very seriously.
Yeah, and so did like Plato.
That's right.
Yeah, and what was that? 2,000 years ago. Right. So, now when it comes to the afterlife and consciousness and reincarnation, we can look at and cite so many examples, like you have in this excellent paper. By the way, Genocide and Bill, if you could put the link up to the Bigalow paper for Jeffrey up in the chat. We've got it on social media and over on the website. Put that link up, and I want everybody to go and spend some time. It's a long read, and there's a lot of citations. I've found myself going left and right throughout this, and plus a huge amount of video is in this paper. But so many cases, and the ones that fascinate me probably the most, like Eben Alexander, but it's the doctors and the medical professionals throughout the world that are, firsthand responders that are dealing with life and death. And they go through these experiences and they witness these things firsthand. And they come from that pragmatic, chemical, black and white world, right, of medicine. And then they get introduced to this, and that's a paradigm, life-changing thing that these medical professionals are going through. But it's their testimony that says a lot to me. You've cited a lot of this evidence. How do you walk away from that, and what do you ultimately think is going on?
Well, reading the evidence, you could read that paper. It's free, incidentally. You can download it for free. It won the essay competition sponsored by the Bigalow Institute for Consciousness Studies. So I got a large financial award for the essay. But
you tell everybody what you got.
I got a check for $500,000.
That's what I'm talking about. Congratulations. Look, there is so much work in this paper. Yeah. And as I'm reading through it and I'm remembering the interviews and some of the things that you have compiled over the years, and it says to me, that's what happens to somebody that is on a journey. You're out there, you're asking the questions. It's one interview after another. And in the end, you've got a big pile of reference material, and you're able to turn around and put this paper together. But that's a life's work that is there. So you deserve every penny. It's an extraordinary piece of work.
Well, thank you. And people have told me, and I think it's correct, that the award sort of justified a very risky decision I made when I was in my 20s to get a doctoral degree, a unique degree in parapsychology.
So the question was, what? For me, it's the medical professionals. For you, what's your takeaway when you look at the body of evidence?
Well, yeah, the point I wanted to make was that reading the evidence might persuade some people, but most people, they could read that paper and study it and play all the videos that are linked to it and still say, well, I'm not convinced. And the reason is, until you've had a direct experience yourself, you're going to still harbor some doubts. And in my case, my career in parapsychology essentially started with an after-death communication that left me with no doubt.
Oh, let's talk about that. And you cite it throughout the paper, and everybody can go and read those details. But you go back in the paper referencing this first experience. Take us through that. What happened?
Well, if you had known me in 1972, you would have seen a graduate student in criminology at Berkeley. I was doing volunteer work at San Quentin Prison in the psychiatric unit, conducting group therapy sessions with murderers and rapists.
Woo.
And I expected that I was going to have a career somehow in the criminal justice system and psychotherapy. And I was looking at, the worst people in society, people who were criminally insane. And
it's a growth industry.
Yeah, little did I know.
yeah, right.
But I had a dream back then in March of 1972, in which my great uncle Harry Schwamm, a man I didn't know well, he was 50 years older than me, and he came to me in the dream, and it was so beautiful and so powerful that when I woke up from the dream, I was crying, tears of joy. It was like I had been to heaven. And I was singing at the same time a very sacred song from the Jewish tradition. And I'd never had such an experience before or since. But I wrote home to my parents. I said, "How's Uncle Harry? I had a dream about him." And my mother called me immediately and said, "How did you know Uncle Harry just died?" And when I tried to reconcile it, it seemed he died at the moment I had this dream. It was like he took me along on the journey partway.
And what did you say to your mom?
Well, I said, could you arrange to have an object of Uncle Harry's sent to me so that I could remember him by? And she did. I got a book. I received a book, and I was told this was Uncle Harry's favorite book. And it turned out that it was a mystical book in the Jewish tradition. It was written in Yiddish, so I had to have it translated, but it was basically what is known as the Tales of the Baal Shem Tov. And the Baal Shem Tov was a rabbi who lived in the 17th century and was the founder of the Jewish, it's known as the Hasidic mystical tradition in Judaism. And I only learned after his death that my great uncle Harry had been a mystic all his life, but he hid it, as most Jews in that era did when they came to the United States. They wanted to blend in to American society. They didn't want to be seen as different. So that part of Jewish life was kept hidden from me.
Everybody hit it though, Jeffrey. And you know what's strange to me is when we look at, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a religious text, but different cultures, and let's push this back 5,000 years, 4,000 years, where, and I understand there was no internet and no TV and no distractions and multimedia. I get that part of it. But from the year 0 to the year 2023, 2,000 years have now passed, where we have let go of the idea of using consciousness or creativity or thoughts or any of that. We went to a material way of life, and a lot of things occurred to allow that to happen. But it's like we completely forgot what our ancient ancestors spent thousands of years developing and understanding. That's the part that I don't get. We just forgot, like nearly overnight, didn't we?
even worse than forgetting, we assume that those ancient people were deluded and caught up in harmful superstitions, and that the way they thought about the world was dangerous, and we must do everything we can so that we don't slide back into the mud of superstition.
Well, okay, so isn't I don't want to sound naive or cavalier, okay? But it's nervous laughter. But isn't the demigods of Egypt, or what Moses did on the top of Mount Sinai, or what the baby Jesus went through, or Fatima? Let's go to today, right? Isn't angels, ghost, ET, the multiverse, and consciousness and spirit, aren't we talking about the same things, just with different words? And why is it okay? Yeah, and Jeffrey, why is it okay to believe in angels, but parapsychology is crazy talk? It doesn't make any sense to me.
I don't know how to explain that. I think that many people who believe in angels think that parapsychologists are harsh skeptics when it comes to their own worldview, and perhaps many parapsychologists are. I can't say that. I don't know that I'm typical of other people in parapsychology. I do know that there are materialists who are also parapsychologists.
Really? Are you going to throw in reductionists too?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Wow. I need to hang out with you, and I need to go to dinner. We just need to have a dinner. The other part of this, though, when we talk about these ideas, just in a general sense, I don't understand how the suggestion of entanglement, or the suggestion of the quantum world, or the suggestion of extra dimensions, that these are terms that are okay to discuss. But the thought of parapsychology or telekinesis or remote viewing, now we're getting beyond what is acceptable. When in reality, remote viewing is something that occurs at the quantum level. And this is stuff that has been proven in the lab. It's really weird how that definition has just got a line between it.
Well, I don't know that anybody has proven that remote viewing occurs at the quantum level. It's an interesting hypothesis, but it's hard to test. I will say this about why it's such a taboo topic, where you can talk about quantum entanglement. They just awarded Nobel Prizes for people who did research in quantum entanglement. But I remember the day I was a graduate student at Berkeley, and Arthur C. Clarke came to speak on campus back in the 1970s. And he had just published a little piece in Time magazine critical of the Israeli psychic Uri Geller. And I had been involved in bringing Uri Geller to Berkeley to be tested, in fact, in the physics department there. And so I raised my hand in the talk, and I said, "Mr. Clarke, do you believe in ESP?" And he gave me what I think is a very, very revealing answer. He said, "No, I do not, because I don't want anybody to read my mind."
It would be a crowded room. It would be a crowded room. I've often, when I talk to so many people that have abilities that I find extraordinary, that if you don't have the ability to turn this off, if you can't control it, it would drive me crazy. right? It would be a very, very, very crowded room. And I don't know if I would want that ability to read somebody else's mind or to communicate through, through our brains that way, because it would be like a telephone call with 50 people on the line.
Well, even worse than that, you would begin to experience the suffering and pain of other people. And I'm of the opinion that we all have enormous psychic abilities, but we shut it down ourselves. We numb ourselves because we want to protect ourselves from basically the pain of the world. You don't want to have to experience what the people in Gaza are going through right now.
Right. And is that an example of how perfect the brain is? Because I don't know if that's consciousness doing that work or if it is the brain doing that work.
That's a very good point. William James, the founder of American psychology and also a psychical research, is what parapsychologist was known as back then. And he was one of the founders of psychical research. But he suggested that the brain doesn't create consciousness. Actually, it's a filter. The brain keeps us from knowing everything all at once. It narrows down what we are able to be aware of, which is necessary so that we can meet our survival needs.
Now, I can't speak for the rest of the universe. I can take a pretty good guess, but just terra firma right here, I would say that the most perfect creation, perfect, is the human brain. I'm not speaking about chimps. No. I'm not talking about the brain in a worm, right? But the human brain is perfect. It may be the most perfect creation that we know of.
Why do you say perfect? What's perfect about it?
Because first, we understand none of it, right? Right? But yet, the ability to have trillions of calculations going on per nanosecond, just so you and I can have this conversation, and to be aware of our environment, and to smell and to taste our environment in real time while I'm speaking to you. All of this occurs. And then you have everything that is going on trillions of times in a second with vision. And the brain is calculating all of that, allowing me to look at you and speak at the same time and think about the very small and the very big all at the same time. But yet we don't know how this happens. And I would say that that's nearly perfect. Yeah. I can't think of something more perfect of a creation.
Well, we were talking about consciousness earlier, and I'm inclined toward the view that the brain doesn't do any of those things. Consciousness does. And the brain exists within consciousness rather than consciousness existing within the brain.
Okay, so what came first then? What came first? Consciousness created the brain. It needed a vehicle to drive.
Yeah. That's a very good metaphor. I like that.
Yeah, well, you can have it. See, that's the beauty of me being intimidated by another show host. It keeps me on my toes, Jeffrey. Let's take our break right here. We're going to take a quick break. Our guest tonight, the one and only Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove. When we come back, we're going to talk more about near-death experiences. We're talk about his new paper. It's not his newest paper. That won the Bigalow Award. We'll talk about more of that when we come back. This is Fade to Black. I'm Jimmy Church. Stay with us.
My job is not to preach. My job is to take you on this journey.
In a state of passion, nothing negative can happen.
That it's the moons of those planets that would have life.
Sometimes I see, these energies also in your field.
It is our passion and our pleasure.
Hi, everybody. Jimmy Church here. Very special announcement, and that is we are shipping Fade to Black t-shirts again. It's been almost 2 years. We did a full upgrade to the website, so you can head over to jimmychurchradio.com. It's all simple to do, and it's right there. Remember, we broadcast 4 nights a week, Monday through Thursday. We bring you the best, the brightest, the most knowledgeable and amazing guests, the best conversations. We do that 4 nights a week. We also do 4 days a week. We broadcast the news, and we do that live too as well. It's not a one-man show. I do it with website support. I do it with producers. I do it with writers and artists. All contribute to the show. The best way to help support what we do here is with the Fade to Black t-shirt. And you can get your Fade to Black t-shirt one of 2 ways. First, go to jimmychurchradio.com, order a shirt. It's really that simple. You're going to get a tracking number, it's going to get shipped, and it's going to get autographed. The second way to get a shirt is with a Game Changer membership. Now, the Game Changer membership not only includes a free t-shirt, but you get a private email to me. You get unlimited commercial-free downloads. You have full access to the website, and everything includes free shipping, and everything is autographed. So help support the show. Get your Fade to Black t-shirt today. The links are below. You can just go to jimmychurchradio.com, and it's right on the website. So there you go. I'm Jimmy Church, Fade to Black. I'm so excited that I just have one thing to say. Go Beckley Teppy. River Moon Coffee, makers of the Fade to Black blend. Truly the best coffee on planet Earth. Just visit rivermoonwellness.com or their Amazon store. It's all simple to do. You can check out the Fade to Black blend, the Game Changer blend, or any of their Black Moon Wellness products. It's the only coffee I drink. It is the best, and it's Doc. Again, rivermoonwellness.com. All right. Welcome back, Fade to Black. I am your host, Jimmy Church. Tonight, Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove is with us. And now, Jeffrey, I want to talk specifically about your paper, Beyond the Brain. And as we get into this, has the afterlife, in your opinion, through this study, is the afterlife confirmed?
Yes.
That's the perfect answer. Now, as a show host, you know that is also too short. So as the host, I have to ask why.
Well, we have over 150 years of evidence that has accumulated. If you go to the archives of the Society for Psychical Research. They began this investigation. The society was formed in the 1880s, but really the research began in the 1850s. And some of the most prominent scientists of that era were convinced of the research, and it's only gotten stronger and stronger every decade since then. The sad truth is that most people don't know that this evidence even exists.
And now, if you were in court, right, you're in front of the Senate Intelligence Committee, and they're going to say, "Okay, this is great, but what can you tell us? Where is your proof? What is it that you slide to the middle of the table first?"
Okay, I think an excellent example would be what I call the chess game from beyond the grave. And this is a case in which a Swiss economist named Wolfgang Eisenbeis, who had an interest in the paranormal, and a friend named Robert Rollins, who was a medium who practiced automatic writing. And he thought, what if we could find a deceased chess master who would be willing to communicate through the medium and play a game of chess with a living chess master? And he actually proposed this idea to Victor Korchnoi, who at the time was the number 2 ranked chess player in the world. And then they asked Robert Rollins to ask his spirit guides to look around the afterlife and see if you can find one of these people. They gave him a long list of deceased chess players who could play chess at the grandmaster level. And sure enough, a fellow named Geza Maraksi, Hungarian chess player who died in 1951, began communicating through the medium, both in Hungarian and in German. And it was automatic writing, as I mentioned. And he actually played a complete game of chess with Victor Korchnoi. It was done over the mail. Took a long time to go back and forth because of Korchnoi's travel schedule, and sometimes the medium got ill. But they completed the entire game. Korchnoi actually did win. But
what?
Korchnoi, the living chess player, won the game.
Okay.
But there were moments when he thought he might lose. The game was played at the grandmaster level. It was a close game. And of course, the interesting thing is that in the course of the game, Maraksi, the deceased chess player who had died decades earlier, was playing the game in the style that he was accustomed to. The game of chess, like any game, evolved over time. And some of the moves that were considered good moves in the 1940s and early 50s were no longer good moves because counter moves had been developed along the way. So actually, Maraksi had a very weak opening because of that, but he played a very strong middle game, and it looked as if Korchnoi was going to lose. But at the end, Korchnoi played a better end game and won the game. But my friend Russell Targ, who you probably know,
I do,
the brother-in-law of Bobby Fischer, one of the world's greatest chess players ever. And so he showed the game move by move to Bobby Fischer. And Bobby looked at it and he said, yes, this game was being played at the grandmaster level. So I think that's evidence not only of spirit communication, but a skill, a very particular skill that couldn't be duplicated. And in fact, at the time the game was played, chess computers were not as advanced as they are now. You couldn't have duplicated that game back then. It ran, I think, from 1987 into the early 90s. It was played so slowly, but the computers in that era could not duplicate such a game.
I used to have this software. I haven't done it in years, but I forget what it was called, Grandmaster 5000 or whatever it was, a computer program. And you could play the 200 greatest games ever, right? And it was an interesting study to go through. By the way, I thought I was going to get good. Nah, never. I never did. I thought if I do this enough. Right? If I do this enough, I'll get good at chess. The mind. Okay, we have some terms here. We have the soul. We have our consciousness. We have our id, and we have our memories too, as well. When our physical self shuts down, are all of those together? Is a consciousness the umbrella and everything is underneath it? And what departs the body and what stays?
Good questions. And I can't say that I have a definitive answer. My best take is that there are many options and that it might be different for everybody. Like we have good evidence. The University of Virginia has a database of over 2,500 instances in which young children remember their past lives. That doesn't mean that everybody reincarnates. And the Egyptians, if we go back to ancient Egypt, where they paid a lot of attention to death and the afterlife, and they had their Book of the Dead and enormous rituals involving embalming and building massive tombs and so on. I mean, death was big business in Egypt. But they believed that the soul wasn't a single entity. They had 10 different words for different aspects of the soul. And they seemed to suggest that these different aspects might go in different directions after death. They, like our genes. In some species, the genes recombine and you get new individuals with a different combination of genes. So aspects of our personality might work the way genes do, for all I know. But there are certainly some examples where the intact personality survives and returns through mediumship, for example, or the example of the chess game.
Right? Is it a situation where, and again, I don't want to sound too fundamental here, but is it a situation of a square can be a rectangle, but a rectangle can't be a square when we're discussing soul and consciousness? Or one can go one way, but one cannot go the other.
Yeah, I'm not sure about
is the soul consciousness, or is that a separate situation? I get into these arguments, not arguments, I should say, lively conversations with people all the time about this. Mm-hmm. and also memories are electronically stored, right? Those are on a hard drive in our brain. Those are ones and zeros. I
don't think so.
See, that's what I like, a lively conversation. That's what I'm referring to. Is all of this lumped together, or are these separate situations?
Gosh, that's a big, big question. I can only tell you how I've come to synthesize things for myself. And I was, of course, influenced by Arthur M. Young, who I spoke of earlier, who was an early mentor of mine in my formative years. And he would distinguish between the soul and the spirit. And he draws that distinction from ancient philosophy. I think even Aristotle had such a distinction. And the idea would be that pure consciousness, you could say consciousness without an object, the very fact that we are conscious beings derives from spirit, and that there's really one spirit and we all share it. But soul, on the other hand, has to do with our yearnings, with our desires, our drives, our history, our memory, our personality. And those are, you could say, the contents of consciousness. They're not pure consciousness. And where the spirit is eternal, the soul is not necessarily eternal. It might dissolve at death and merge right back into pure spirit, or it might hold itself together and be reborn again, or it might manifest in other ways as a ghost or as a spirit guide.
Well, okay. So if we take reincarnation as an example of this, and life's lessons, and you've got some more stuff too. You've got now you have to come back as a chihuahua, right? And you've got to do, now. If that's the case, then life's experiences and memories that we are supposed to learn and grow from don't necessarily carry over. I don't have conscious memories of me as a chihuahua, but I probably, you know what I mean? Where do those memories go through reincarnation?
It's a good question. I can't claim to have all the answers. I certainly study metaphysics to learn what other people have to say about it. But it seems to me that the possibilities are just endless. I tend to think, for example, of let's take the body. You and I both have bodies. The bodies are made out of cells. And back when I was younger, they used to have this idea that phylogeny recapitulates ontogeny, which means that the human body, when we're first conceived of, we're a zygote, we're a single cell. And we go from being a single-celled organism up to a human being. And during that process, the fetus along the way goes through all the earlier stages of evolution. There's a point at which the fetus sort of resembles a tadpole, for example. And so we have the whole history of biological evolution in our own bodies, but we don't remember all of biological evolution, but still it's there. It's part of who we are. And I'm inclined to think that even though I don't have the memories, my body is actually probably 1 billion years old.
We're all stardust.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, we're all stardust. Literally stardust. And when I say that to people, hold up your left hand, hold up your right hand, you're looking at two different stars. Right?
Yeah.
It's the truth. It's a bizarre thing. The Brain Project that is still ongoing in Switzerland. The goal there was to build a computer with the same amount of endpoints as the human brain. Right. And the goal was to get to, I think the number at the time, it's changed a little bit, but they wanted to get to like 1 trillion nodes. Yeah. And if we get to that number, right, then we are equivalent to the human brain. And then this computer should act like us. Well, they did that. They got to that point. And they found out that they knew nothing, right? That it wasn't acting like the human brain. One of the thoughts was that if we accumulate enough mass with this supercomputer as well, that sentience may rise, and that may occur because of consciousness being in all of these particles. None of those occurred, and it still just acted like a computer. And why is that a fear? Is that something that you think about? That pushing this stuff too far, trying to replicate the human brain and create consciousness, is that something that you think about?
Well, yeah, I'm very curious about it. I watched a lot of Star Trek programs, and I remember Data, the mechanical android who was just like a human being and was, at least in that series, in that fictional series, was conscious. And I don't think we know enough yet to know whether we can create a conscious android like Data. But I've done many interviews with Stuart Hameroff. You may know him, who is a medical doctor and anesthesiologist at the University of Arizona. And he hypothesizes, and it has good evidence, in my opinion, for the idea that it's not just the neural signals going down the axons and dendrites of the neurons and crossing the synapses that causes consciousness, that something else is going on inside the neurons at what he calls the microtubules, which are much smaller than the individual neurons, so small that they're getting into the quantum level. And so the calculations of people who think we can build a computer that might mimic neural signals traveling along the neurons, he said, they're missing the boat. The number of neural connections is going to need to be vastly greater than that.
Yeah, it's not a trillion. It's trillions followed by probably 10 more digits.
Yeah,
trillion to the 10th power.
Something like that.
It's a crazy number.
That might be the case, or maybe it'll never work. We just don't know at this point, and I'm willing to keep an open mind about it. But I would lean towards the idea that, as I've said several times already, the consciousness is not what's known as an epiphenomenon of matter. You can't put together a complex system of matter and it will create consciousness. Just the opposite. Matter and every combination of matter exists within consciousness. So it wouldn't exist at all if we couldn't perceive it. What would the universe be like if nobody were there to experience it? It would be nothing. There'd be no experience.
That's right. Okay, so how does the hierarchy work? Now, how does the hierarchy work? Okay, so I die, right? You die, right? And then we hook up with somebody that says it's not your time. Now, right? But over and over and over and over again, you must go back. Right?
Or people sometimes bargain to go back.
Right.
They want to go back even if it is their time.
How does that hierarchy work? Is there a judicial system on the other side? And who's the big boss? Who are they getting their instructions from?
Great question, isn't it?
You write about this in the paper. I want everybody to go and read through this, because there are it's case after case after case where this specific subject is brought up, and in a lot of cases, people don't know that they're dead, right? But yet they are told, you know what? Check it out. Take a quick look. Look around, but you got to go back. And in some cases, they don't want to go back.
Right.
But they're told. But that says to me that there is structure on the other side.
Yes, it does. And what is that structure? It becomes more of a theological question almost, rather than a scientific question. And so I don't address it in the paper, like who's in charge of the afterlife. And the ancient Greeks thought it was the god Hades, and different in India, it's Yama, the Lord of Death. So we have a lot of mythology around it, and it's all very interesting. The best interpretation that I know of would be a book called, I know the name is on the tip of my tongue. It'll come to me in a moment. It was channeled. It's a channeled book, supposedly channeled from Frederick Myers, who was a psychical researcher who spent his life exploring life after death. He wrote a classic book called Human Personality and Its Survival of Bodily Death back in 1903. It was published posthumously. And then after his death, he communicated to other members of the Society for Psychical Research for some 30 years. And at the end of that 30-year period, he channeled a couple of books. And the name of this one is called The Road to Immortality.
That's right.
The result of automatic writing through an Irish medium named Geraldine Cummins. And she would write as fast as she could. Her eyes are closed. She had a friend who would change the paper. Every time she finished one sheet, her friend would put another piece of paper under her. So she just keep writing. And in this book, Myers is describing levels of the afterlife. In this case, 7. It seems to be a common number in a lot of systems describing the afterlife. And each one becomes more and more refined and different. So at some of the higher levels, for example, you have what he calls the group soul. And you realize that you are part of a group soul. There could be anywhere from 20 to 1,000 other individuals that you share this soul experience with. And on and on. And I suppose you find it's sort of like the 7 heavens of ancient mythology. The higher you get, the closer you get to the ultimate divine. But along the way, there are going to be hierarchies of spiritual entities who are working with you.
Do you find it fascinating that we are able to have this conversation about this subject, and that we are the only species, on this planet that can do that? And do you ever postulate that animals contemplate death? Is death a part of their life? Or is it just us that are able to sit and have these experiments of thought? It's very fascinating to me.
Well, there's a wonderful case in Africa where a man, I forget his name, but he spent his whole life and he devoted it to taking care of and protecting elephants. And he got to know lots of elephants in Africa. And when he died, his body was kept, I guess, in state at the home where he lived. And oddly enough, a parade, literally a parade of elephants came to his house at the time of his death, when his body was lying there in the house. And they were led by this matriarch elephant, this big female elephant, whom I presume he had known. And they came to the house, they circled around the house, and they walked away as if they were commemorating his death. So I think that certainly elephants seem to have an appreciation for death, and many other species are known to bond with each other, form affectionate relationships, and mourn the death of those that they care for. So I don't think it's strictly human.
And is that a suggestion of a universal consciousness? Right? That's what that says to me.
Yeah, it says something like that to me. I tend to accept what's part of what you could call the primordial tradition or the perennial philosophy, the teachings of the mystics all over the world throughout human history, that ultimately at the level of spirit, we are one with everything, with the elephants, with the aliens, with the worms in the ground, and with things that at the ego level we would find horribly repellent, germs or rats or spiders. We're one with all of them.
So is the universe crowded with blobs of consciousness floating around with no place to go? Or is it ever revolving? Right? You let go of your meat suit, your consciousness departs your body, and then immediately finds another home, and the universe isn't as crowded as we think it may be.
Well, I don't think there are blobs of consciousness floating around. I think that the entire universe exists within consciousness. Max Planck, the founder of quantum physics, thought the same. He said, consciousness is fundamental. You can't get underneath consciousness.
Yeah, okay. But, you bring up Max Planck. I'm going to bring up Brian Greene. Brian Greene, in his latest book, Until the End of Time, at the end of the book, he discusses this, and it's a strange way for him to try to mention consciousness without saying the word, right? He won't put it in print. I get that. I understand. But this is what he says. He says at the end of everything, when everything dissolves, right? All particles separate and everything is done. At the end of everything, that all that is left is thought, thinking. All of the memories that ever were are going to exist. And that's a heavy thought, and it's his way of saying, right? Consciousness exists in the universe without actually saying it, and trying to turn it into a theoretical physics idea. At the end of everything, something still must exist. And that's the way that he puts it. And if that's the case, well, then it must occur today, and it must have occurred 50,000 years ago too, as well.
Well, it's an ancient idea. Some people refer to that as the Akashic Records. William James, who I referred to before, the founder of American psychology, called it the cosmic reservoir of all knowledge. So it's a very appealing idea. And from that point of view, the idea is when you die, all your memories and thoughts become part of this cosmic reservoir. You will no longer exist, but the reservoir will, so that from that point of view, all the evidence for life after death would be just examples of living human beings tapping into that reservoir. And it's a nice idea. I think there's more to it than that. And probably, Jimmy, the actual truth is more complex than the human brain, or the human mind, I should say, can comprehend.
Well, so you brought up ancient Egypt. Staying on the subject, but going back, it's such a modern concept today, but in the way that they wrote about it is that you would have a life review, right? We're going to weigh your soul against a feather, right? Mm-hmm. And win or lose, here we go. But today, with these near-death experiences, we do have the life review. We do have the questions of a ledger sheet and maybe a balance owed, right? And so forth. But these are concepts that go back 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10,000 years.
Yeah, they're very ancient concepts, and in almost every culture, there is this sense of there being a judgment. And I even have an ancient Chinese scroll that shows the afterlife, and you see this big fat fellow sitting there judging people. He's the judge, and they come to him, and he reviews their life, and then he determines what their next life will be. So, if they were, for example, cruel to animals in their when they were alive, then they'll spend the rest of their afterlife having to be an animal themselves with other animals riding on top of them. I think it's a metaphor. If you look at the literature of the near-death experience, people who come back say, yes, there is a judgment, but ultimately we are the ones who judge ourselves.
So that's the hierarchy.
Yeah.
See, I knew we'd get to it. I knew that we would get to it. And what's the life lesson here? Be kind to Chihuahuas. Be kind to Chihuahuas. But okay. My mother passed about 5 years ago, and I got robbed of one of life's great promises. I didn't get to, she passed. I flew to Florida. I was here in LA. I was on the air when she passed. I'd spoken to her right before the show. And but anyway, my mom, okay, let me back up. You were talking about automatic writing. I don't use bad words on this show. Okay, it's a family show. But let me tell you about my crazy ass mom. Right? So my mom, when I was a kid, she would do automatic writing. Now I'm 5 years old. I'm 6 years old. Okay, so this is 1968, 69, like right in there. And so right before bed each night, she would get ready at the dining room table. She'd have a ream of paper. She'd put it down. She'd have her pen. And I'm like, Mom, what are you going to do? I'm going to do automatic writing. Okay, all right. And I would watch her, and she would look up, and she would write, looking up, flip the page over. I'd go to bed. I'd wake up in the morning. That ream of paper is flipped over, right? 500 pages, right? Or whatever it was. I have no idea. And I would ask her, what'd you write about? I don't know. So 50 years later, I've got my mom on the phone, and I'm on Coast to Coast. I'm hosting Coast to Coast. I got the TV show, and it's all this, all this stuff, this consciousness things that you and I talk about. And I go, hey, Mom, I want you on the show. She goes, what would I talk about? I said, automatic writing. Edgar Cayce, Eric Von Daniken, all that stuff that you taught me when she goes, that was then. Right? That was it. But that was my mom. So she dies. I go to Florida. We do all of that. I come back to LA, and I am waiting for her to come see me. It's that, isn't that one of the gifts of life, that your mother, your father, after they pass, they come and hang out in your bedroom one night, and it's okay, right? Whatever. But that never happened to me.
No.
And I feel a little cheated. And my mom, out of all the people, right? You remember the deal that Harry Houdini made? Right? Okay, here's the secret word. Well, if anybody was going to do it, it'd be Harry Houdini or my mom. And it just didn't happen. But I think that for so many people, it does, like you with your Uncle Harry. How common is this? And why did I get robbed? Did my mom just go, I'm done with this? I'm just moving on. And she kept heading in one direction, and she never looked back?
Well, have you ever had dreams in which your mother came?
Great question. You ready?
Yeah.
Before she passed, I dreamt about her all the time. I'm being straight with you. Mm-hmm. After she passed, none. Yeah. I don't dream about her.
Yeah. I don't know what to say about that, Jimmy. I think the best I could say is that every case is different. No two people are the same. No two experiences are the same. But what I do know, and you told me yourself just before the show began, you yourself have done some channeling now.
Yes. Yeah. 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 And see, here's the thing. Here's the thing with all of it. Just like yourself, I came into this world of discovery with questions, right? Thinking aloud, literally thinking aloud. And where I am today, and we started the show with this question, where I am today, am I closer to the answers? No, but I know a hell of a lot. And I've learned so much and I have changed so much. But the one thing that I have learned, there is something going on. I just don't I don't know what it is. It's really strange. It's a bizarre thing to me. I know that the world is not what it seems. Right? But I'm no closer to the answer. Even after tonight's show with you, right? I'm here seeking answers with you, Jeffrey, and it's a perplexing thing that we are allowed to have these questions and think about this stuff and have this conversation. That's the part that is so fascinating to me, and that's where I think it does go way beyond the brain.
And when you do have the final answer, it won't be one that you put into words. It'll be a deep inner knowing, and that'll be enough.
Well, like my mom, right? I'm serious. She probably a lot like the last conversations that I had with her. She was tired. That was the first thing. She was just tired, and I get that part. But she experienced everything that she needed to on planet Earth. I'm serious, man. I think the door hit her in her butt and she just closed it and just headed off into her next journey. And I don't think she looked over her shoulder.
And why not?
Yeah. And with this subject of dreams, the access to other worlds while dreaming, is that an escape from this reality and access to what we are seeking through a seance or through mediumship or through deep meditation? Do we achieve that with dreams and lucid dreaming?
You mean to escape?
Yeah. Is it to another dimension?
Could well be. I'm pretty sure there are other dimensions. And as an example, there's been research on people who have a lot of subjective psychic experiences. They're just, all the time having these experiences. And a very high percentage of these people suffered from childhood abuse of one form or another, physical or sexual or emotional abuse. And they had a reason to escape. They needed to, find a way to hide from the physical reality that was punishing them. And they seemed to kind of break through and enter into these other dimensions where they become open to psychic experiences and spiritual contexts that elude so many of us. So to a certain extent, it is escaping, especially for those people.
I wanted to talk specifically about a couple of points in the paper, and it involves technology. Because if we go back throughout history, the contact with those that aren't living anymore involve technology of the period, right? That's it. That's just, you are in the day that you are in.
Yeah.
And so, but when we come up to today, there is communication, it seems, with those that have passed through technology, whether it's a television set or it's a telephone or it's an email. What does that suggest to you? And to me, it's completely fascinating. And it's electromagnetic, right? It's an energy source. That's the way that I look at it. But what does it suggest to you when this happens?
Well, for a long time, I thought that the people who reported these things were imagining it, and that it was an example of what's known as apophenia, or projecting meaning into a situation which is not meaningful, really. Like you hear static on the radio and you think that somebody's talking to you. But as I delved into it more deeply, I realized that you can explain away a lot of the reported evidence that way, but not all of it. Sometimes you have tape recorded examples of where people are having two-way conversations with another entity, and the medium of exchange between them is a radio or a television that's not even plugged in.
It's electromagnetic, right? It's source, it's energy, it's consciousness. And the ability to get deep into electronics makes sense to me, right? You cited an example by the way, I was blown away. Everybody go and check out Jeffrey's paper, and we've got the links there. I can only imagine if I'm sitting here, here's my cell phone, and I get a text message from my mom, right? She's been dead for 5 years.
Right.
I heard what you were saying tonight with Jeffrey. I just wanted to say hello, right? What? I would lose my mind, right? But you show the screenshots of someone's phone whose wife is reaching out. That's crazy talk, but is it? Right? It's just an energy source. And also
it happened. It happened.
Yeah. And I think you can tell the whole story, but you also correct me if I'm wrong, but they went and checked her phone, and she's dead. I'm saying that they checked her phone that used to be hers, and there was no text message that went out, but the text message was received on his phone. Can you tell everybody what happened?
Okay. The central person in the story is the co-host with me on New Thinking Aloud. Her name is Emmy Vadnais. Lovely woman, lives in St. Paul, Minnesota. Her mother-in-law died, and they had the body at her home. The body was laying in state at the home before it was taken to be cremated. And then they took the body in late in the night to the crematorium. Body was cremated. And at 3 a.m, Emmy's stepfather received a text message, supposedly from Emmy's cell phone. And the text message said, "Glad it's over."
Yeah, glad it's over. Right.
Glad it's over. And so Emmy's father-in-law, or her stepfather reached out to her and said, "Well, you sent me this text at 3 a.m. Why did you do that? You mean you're glad that your mother-in-law died?" And she said, "Of course not. I'm not glad she died. I loved her. I would never have sent a text. And furthermore, my cell phone shows that no text was sent at all at that time. That they had been texting. So there were other texts between them, but not that one." And I have the picture. You can see the screen on his cell phone shows a text came from her, and her cell phone, same time, shows no text was sent. And the mother-in-law at that time had just been cremated.
And phone calls, right? And when you think about this, it's not really that crazy. Energy is energy, right? That's it. That's how electricity works. That's the basic fundamentals of physics and electromagnetic, how the sun operates, right? These are the basic principles of everything.
Yeah.
So why not? Why does this seem so strange? And EVPs and the ability to record these spirits or whatever they are, it's a vehicle for them to communicate with.
Yeah, not to mention things like full body materialization, which has also been reported on numerous occasions. It's so easy to dismiss the people who make those claims, but when you look at it carefully and examine moment by moment what they're telling you, and often there are corroborating witnesses and so on, you just can't write it off. Although the temptation is to say, that's impossible, I'm not even going to look at it.
You know what? There's a cost for that, though. I think that humanity pays the price for ignoring these things.
A deep price, a very deep price. We lose the potential for self-knowledge. The greatest gift that we can have is understanding our own consciousness, and we sacrifice that so that we can experience a little bit of certainty that we know what's what.
Material things. And I like stuff. I do.
Yeah.
But I have stuff that makes me happy. It's not my goal. Right? Do you understand the difference? It's not my goal. My goal is not guitars or their value. It's the music that they create.
Yeah.
Right? Or whatever it is. Material things are fine if they are a part of your happiness and they're part of your life's journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my goal. And that's the other part of this, is that's the danger that we get into by ignoring the evidence. We should take a hard look at all of this and continue the journey, to continue to think outside of the box. And that's the difference.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to take any of those guitars with you when you pass, but what you will take is your character. I think the person that you've become, how well did you love the people in your life? That's what you get to bring with you.
Yeah. I've warned my daughter, right, Nicole, I feel so bad because when I go, and I will eventually, right? We all do. That poor girl's got to bring a big truck to my house. and the burden that I am putting on her, what does she do with all of these things? Well, I've thought about that a lot. So it's time to pump the brakes on the guitar. Next week, I'm going to pump the brakes on the guitar stuff. What's next for you? And not only it's a broad question, but you've been doing this for a long time, and the goal and the bar continually, it just gets set higher and higher. What is next for you?
Well, when I set up the YouTube channel in 2015, I created a little introductory statement. Why am I doing this? The original Thinking Aloud series went out of production in 2002, so there was a 13-year gap. And what I said then was that, having received a very unique doctoral degree in parapsychology, I wanted to leave behind a legacy, which is all the data that's available, the best information about consciousness and parapsychology, the way I envisioned it, which is very different than the way J.B. Rhine and the folks at Duke University did. They saw parapsychology as basically a subdivision of experimental psychology, card guessing experiments, and the like. Whereas my vision of parapsychology is that it's a discipline to understand the paranormal, and it goes back thousands of years, and it includes ancient religions and the whole Eastern and Western esoteric traditions, along with all that scientific data. And I thought to myself, or I said in this introductory statement, I don't think in my lifetime they're going to be offering courses and degree programs in parapsychology the way I envision it. But someday I'm sure they will. And then this video archive will be available as a resource. But now I'm finding now that a couple of universities are interested in creating a degree program based on the New Thinking Aloud archives. So I'm spending time right now putting a curriculum together, and people will be able to get advanced degrees.
As you should. It's what's fascinating. These people, I'm going to say this in broad terms, who like to think that they are smart. Right? They go to the Dalai Lama for answers, right? Where they're in this black and white world, a numbers driven world, a capitalistic world. Nothing wrong with that, but where they are running and in charge of tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, and dictating lives and doing all of this stuff. But they go to the Dalai Lama for answers. What's the meaning of life? Why are we here? What am I doing? How does consciousness really work? Is this computer thing a thing, or should we be focused on something else? That's what I find completely compelling. That in the end, you need to go to somebody else that has no concept of what your company is about, but will give you the right answers about what you should be doing. And that's Jeffrey Mishlove.
Well, I'm not the Dalai Lama, but thank you for the comparison.
You understand what I'm saying, and I think that that's important, that we need to pursue this. And thank you for your life's work, my friend. Thank you so much.
Well, it's been a joy for me. I mean, it wasn't always easy. There were certainly many trials and tribulations, but I'm glad now that I'm in my late 70s, I can look back and say it was all worth it.
Just a little bit. Yeah. Jeffrey, thank you so much, my friend. I look forward to our next conversation. Much luck to you and yours in 2024. And again, everybody, the links for the Bigalow paper are up, not only below in the description, but throughout social media, in the chat room, and over on our website. Jeffrey, enjoy the rest of your evening, my friend. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jimmy. It's been a pleasure.
The very best. Dr. Jeffrey Mishlove, everybody. Thank you so much. Perfect way to kick off 2024 this week on Fade to Black. Jeffrey Mishlove. Thank you so much, Jeffrey. And tomorrow night, what am I doing tomorrow night? Does anybody know? Tomorrow night is, Mike Clellan is going to be here. Tomorrow night, we're going to be talking about the messengers, owls, and UFOs, and all of that fun stuff. All of that tomorrow night right here on Fade to Black. Fade to Black is produced by Hilton J. Palmer, Renee Newman, and Michelle Freed. Thank you, Genocide. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Kevin. Webmaster is Drew the Geek. Music, Doug Aldrich. Intro, Spaceboy, spaceboymusic.com. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Game Changer Network. This broadcast is owned and copyrighted 2024 by Fade to Black and the Game Changer Network, Inc. It cannot be rebroadcast, downloaded, copied, or used anywhere in the known universe without written permission from Fade to Black or the Game Changer Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Until tomorrow night with Mike Clellan, I want you to be safe. Go Beckley Tappy.